everybody, it's Jenny, and behind the camera there is Kitty.
Hello.
And we're the Naturalist Interns here at the Arboretum, so thank you for joining our weekly video series. And today we're back at Goose at our beautiful boardwalk because we talked about it a little bit in our last video, but right now this place is all flooded. It's basically a ephemeral pond, so this nice shallow seasonal pond that floods in the spring and an early bit of the summer. And it's an awesome habitat because this is shallow and seasonal. You don't get any big predators like fish living here. That means you have all these invertebrates and salamanders and frogs that lay their eggs in here just because they can take advantage of that nice protected habitat. So for today's video, we're going to do a little bit of a pond study. We're going to go looking in this pond, seeing what we can find, and we'll show you how to do that. It's really not as hard as it sounds, and it will spend a little bit of time going through what we find here. So if you guys are ready for that, let's get started. And we'll come over here, I'll show you guys what we use for our pond studies. But there's not that much you need. What we like to use is a nice big pail. We use white bins to hold the water and whatever we catch, just because the pail bin gives a nice background to look through the stuff we find. We have a nice little dip net here, so just a little net you can find at a dollar store. And we also have our pond life biodiversity sheet. So it has a list of kind of common invertebrates that you can find around. And this is kind of nice because you can kind of go through and kind of try and figure out what you have. Since there's so much diversity, it gives you a bit of a guideline to figure out what you've caught. So our first step of our pond study is you want to fill your bin with a little bit of water from the pond. So I've done that for us already. So some nice clear water. And next, if there's not much to it, you take your little dip net and you swish it around in the water. We like to try and get deep into debris, all that leaf litter and muck at the bottom. So that's where invertebrates like to hide. And it'll swish it around a little bit, wash off as much mud as possible, because it helps to see if the water's not that murky. And we just dump it in our basin and see what we find. So let's give that a try. So now my little dip net's full of debris. I like to kind of swish it around in the water a little bit to wash off any excess mud. And we can take this and we just dump it in our bin. And you can kind of sift through whatever you've dumped in here and kind of look through for any invertebrates that you catch. And you may need to repeat this step a couple times to find a couple different things, but there are definitely lots of things around. And we've already done this. We've started off already. So why don't we actually go over to our other prepared bin where we spend a little bit more time and caught a bunch of other stuff that we can make sure we see. So why don't we head on over to our other bin?
Yeah, let's see what stuff we found here. Lots and lots of activity in this bin you can see already.
Yeah, it may not look like much at first, but if you take a moment and you just start looking through, there's lots of little movements in there that tell us that this bin is not as empty as it looks at a first glance.
All right, what do we see here? Oh, I see this guy here is pretty active.
Yeah, this is a pretty neat little guy. Why don't I catch him in a vial and we can have a closer look at him. Look at him go. He's a good swimmer. Alright. So here he is. And if we look in our biodiversity sheet, we can probably match that up to something. Figure out what he is. See anything that matches?
Oh, this looks like a pretty good match.
Yeah,
fairy shrimp.
So this little guy is a fairy shrimp. And these guys are really cool. They are crustacean, but they're not the shrimp that you're getting in the supermarket to eat or anything like that. And they love to make a habitat of ephemeral ponds like this. These guys are very short-lived, so when the pond is nice and wet and flooded, these guys will be out and about swimming. They have all these appendages that come off of their body that they will kind of flap around and move themselves around through the water, but these appendages also double as gills, so they'll kind of swim around and they'll strain almost microscopic food through the water to feed. And then in a couple months, when this kind of habitat dries up, these guys also die off, but not before laying a bunch of eggs. And these eggs that they're laying, they are covered in this nice hard shell. So it protects them from things like drought when it's nice and dry, and the snow and cold in the winter. And they're pretty much dormant in these eggs until the right kind of conditions come along for them to hatch and grow into nice full-blown adults like this again, which is kind of neat. This process is called cryptobiosis, and basically it means when an animal goes into a state of dormancy and the metabolism drops really low, but not quite, and then when the right conditions arise, then they kind of come back to life. It's the same actually kind of process as those sea monkeys that you used to be able to buy as pets, which is kind of neat. Those are first little feature guests, the fairy shrimp. Very nice little guy. We'll let him go back in here. Let's see what else we can find in here. What else do we see? There's lots of movement in here for sure.
I see lots of little things wiggling around.
Yeah.
Like this one there.
Here's one. When he's scared, he wiggles away from us.
Somewhere here. I lost it though.
Yeah. And there's some here, some here. Maybe we'll catch those guys up in a while too and have a closer look at them. Did I get them? I did. So here's a couple of other invertebrates. They're wiggling around a lot more frantically than our fairy shrimp was. And again, let's have a peek at our biodiversity sheet, see if we can match this up to anything.
I'm thinking mosquito larva.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty good match, I think, too. So this is a type of mosquito larva, and these guys are really cool. They're called normally wigglers because in their kind of immature form, not the adult form that we're most familiar with, they kind of lie on the surface of the water where they breathe and feed, and when they get scared, they wiggle away from the surface. So they're like little wrigglers. And I really like mosquito larvae. I know this is kind of an unpopular opinion. A lot of people don't like mosquitoes because the females will bite us and feed on us in the summer, and it's itchy and annoying. But mosquitoes are actually pretty important organisms to have in an ecosystem. These guys are an important food source for a lot of different things. Like the larva will feed a lot of different types of invertebrates, like dragonfly nymphs will feed on these, or sometimes in different habitats, fish will eat mosquito larvae. As adults, they feed a lot of birds. Some warblers actually time their migration to kind of match up with big eruptions of mosquitoes, so that's important food source for a lot of birds. They're good for pollination, so as adults, only the females actually feed on blood. They need that protein to make eggs, but the males, they're actually flying around eating nectar and pollen and flowers and stuff, so they're a really important pollinator, just like our bees and wasps and stuff. So that's really awesome. And these larvae who are kind of floating around the surface of water, they're eating a lot of detritus that's hanging around floating on the surface of water, so it helps to kind of clean up our water system as well, keeps our waters clean and the surface clear of any gunk, so we can continue to have oxygen filter through the surface and things like that. So they're pretty awesome and pretty important to have around, even though most people may not really like them to start off with. So that's a cool little find, mosquito larvae. A pretty common find. You can pretty much find these guys in any little pool of standing water you can see around.
All right, let's keep looking and see what else we can find. What do you see there?
What do we think? Lots and lots of stuff. I know I was seeing some walking sticks in here earlier, so let me try to find one of those. Sounds a little bit weird, but honestly, just looks like a stick, and the end, it's little legs sticking out, and it's walking around, a walking stick. So I think I see one here, so this guy. Yeah, so there's a little one there, and I know there's a couple more. There's I think another one over there. Oh, and those big guys you see walking around, those are isopods. Those are also crustaceans, just like the fairy shrimp and just like lobsters and shrimp that you'll find at the supermarket. So kind of cool. You're kind of like your neighborhood lobster. But those walking sticks I was talking about earlier, there's a couple in there, and I have caught some for you guys to take a closer look with. So here you go. Do you see how it looks kind of like just like a rolled up leaf or a little stick? And if you look really closely, there's two in there, but there's like a little insect head sticking out along with little insect legs, and they're walking around.
Now these actually are what we call caddisfly larvae. And there's this big one. It's really coming out of its case there. It's giving us a good show. Look at that.
You see his little head and legs and everything.
He has 6 legs, as all insects do. But caddisfly, as adults, they look almost moth-like. But when they're not quite adult, when they're just larvae, and little baby caddisflies growing up, they actually look like this, and they live in the water. They're actually aquatic, and they make cases out of debris in the water. They're really, really similar to caterpillars. One of the biggest traits we associate with caterpillars is that caterpillars use silk to make cocoons and other structures. And these guys will do the same thing. They'll actually have silk glands in their head, and they'll weave silk. And this silk acts kind of like a double-sided tape that works underwater too. Really impressive. And they'll use this double-sided tape to grab pieces of leaves or pebbles or other debris lying around. It has to be the perfect spot, perfect little piece though. And if it finds these little pieces, and it'll glue them together around its body to make a portable case, just like you see here. Now the case that you see serves a number of different purposes. One of the best ones is for camouflage. These guys are small little critters. They don't want to get eaten up by a predator. So you can see the sticks and leaves help them to blend in a little bit better to the environment, so hopefully predators won't see them and they'll leave them alone. In fact, they actually have little pinchers at the end of their long body that holds on to the case from the inside, so it's really hard to get those little guys out of their case. It's really, really good protection for them. Another thing they use these cases for is actually for breathing, because caddisfly larvae, they breathe through gills, but they really rely on running water to move past their gills in order to breathe. Now, that means a lot of caddisfly larvae, they like moving streams, especially with cold water. That's their favorite habitat. But some species have actually evolved to live in standing pools of water, just like the ephemeral pools at Wild Goose Whittier. And how they do this is they actually take advantage of their portable case. You see, inside this little case, they actually have a hump on their body behind their head. And this hump helps them to stay inside their case, but also it gives them a little bit of wiggle room. So behind this hump, their little body is wiggling up and down, up and down. And what that does is it draws water in from the front of the case and then out the back. And this source of running water, that's what allows them to breathe. So their portable case is really also important to help them breathe. It acts as a portable respiratory case as well. And you can see between these two different caddisfly, they are different species, because different species will build their cases out of different things. Do you see how different these two cases are? One of them is made out of leaves and it's really flat and narrow. The other one is made more out of sticks, and I think there's a couple of leafy bits in there, but it's a lot more chunky looking. And that's because these guys are different species, so they'll make their cases out of different things, and they can use things to their advantage as well. For example, some caddisflies that maybe live in a very fast-moving river, they might build their case out of pebbles, and those pebbles are heavy and help them stay in place in the moving water. But for species like this that live in still standing water, they don't want to be weighed down by pebbles. That's really, really heavy, and they want to be able to move very quickly. Maybe if a predator comes, they may be able to get away better. So they'll move, or they'll make their case out of more lightweight material like these leaves, and that helps them to escape predators a little bit easier, and it helps them move a little bit faster. Another really awesome thing, one of the reasons why I'm so happy to see caddisflies in this area is that these guys are really fantastic bioindicators, which means that these guys rely very heavily on clean water. They are very sensitive to pollution. So to find them a habitat like this, that means we have a very nice, healthy aquatic ecosystem, very little pollution. So I'm really, really happy to see these guys. We're going to put them back in with the others. Looks like they don't want to leave. There you go. Look how incredibly similar to sticks they look like. At first glance, you wouldn't even think there's an animal in there, but you can see they're moving with their little legs. Yeah. Very, very fantastic camouflage. Lots and lots of ingenuity built into their fancy little case. Now, of course, it's not just these caddisfly larvae here that are fantastic.
bioindicators for the ephemeral ponds at Wild Goose Woods, because we also have another little friend that we caught during our pond study, and that is this little wood frog here. You may have heard his brethren screaming out all around us. There's wood frogs calling all around us. They're looking for a mate this time of year. There's even a couple of spring peepers calling here and there. Turkey vulture flying in the back. I don't know if you can catch that on the camera. Look at them soaring. These guys were just coming back to Ontario, migrating back to Ontario from a more southernly spent vacation during the winter. So that's pretty awesome to see them around. But this is the wood frog. That's why you hear screaming in the background, all those animals. These are one of Ontario's native frog species. You can recognize them by their overall brown color, especially they have a dark mask on their face. You might be able to see there. There you go, handsome buddy. Yeah. And frogs are really well adapted to aquatic ecosystems just like this. They are very streamlined to move quickly through the water. They have powerful legs. You can even see his powerful legs. That allows them to really jump long distances and also swim through the water. And their feet are webbed. Look at him giving us a good show of his giant webbed hind feet there. And that webbed feet is going to act like flippers to help propel him through the water, swimming along, finding food and doing other important frog business. Frogs are actually really fantastic bioindicators, so the indicators that this is a healthy ecosystem, because their skin is very, very sensitive. They have very thin skin, and there's blood vessels very, very close to the surface of the skin, and that means it allows them to take in oxygen through their skin, so they can actually breathe through their skin, and they can also take in water in and out of their skin as well. And that means there's even a little bit of pollution in the water, they could take that through their skin. It can affect them really, really badly. So if you get a habitat with lots and lots of frogs swimming around, that means it's a nice, healthy habitat. But if you have a habitat, a pond with not so many frogs around, maybe that's an indication that something is wrong. If you take a look at this little guy, you can also see he's got giant eyes on the top of his head. Those eyes are very, very good for seeing around him. In fact, it allows him to stay submerged, mostly underwater, except those giant eyes are on the top of his head, so allow him to peek right over the surface of water and look around for things like food, but also predators. And most frogs also have what we call a nictitating membrane on their eye, which is a clear eyelid that goes over the eye to protect the eye from debris as they're swimming underwater. Now, we're really, really happy to see frogs like this little guy out again, because wood frogs have been hibernating the winter away. We don't see these guys very often through the cold months. And wood frogs especially are fantastic because during hibernation, they like to take it one step further past all the other hibernating animals, because these guys actually freeze completely solid in the winter. What they're gonna do is their body in the fall, when it's starting to get a little bit colder out, is telling them to go find a nice place to spend the winter. They're gonna come out and they're gonna find a nice cozy spot, maybe under some logs, maybe in the leaf litter, things like that, and their body starts producing a lot of glucose, a lot of sugar, and this sugar gets transported to through to their cells, and it acts a bit like antifreeze. So it helps their cells to not freeze completely solid, so that all those ice crystals won't damage their tissues. And all the excess water as well, they'll also transport to maybe their intestinal system and the lymphatic system. So again, we don't get giant ice crystals forming in their cells, freezing solid, and then damaging their delicate organs and tissues. So they freeze completely solid. They're gonna stay frozen throughout the entire winter. Their heart stops, they don't breathe, completely sound like a block of ice, which seems crazy to me. But when things are warming up, like right around now, we're seeing these guys come up again, start defrosting and becoming active, swimming around, hopping around, doing all those fun frog things. And one of the things they're most excited to do in springtime is to find a mate. This is the breeding season for wood frogs. That's where you see all those wood frogs, or I'd rather hear all those wood frogs in the background screaming awake, because they are singing to help attract mates, just like birds will. And that means once they mate, they're gonna lay eggs, and this is a fantastic spot again for wood frogs and other amphibians to lay their eggs, because there aren't fish around to eat those eggs. There aren't predators around, so it's a really safe habitat for them to grow up in, and that makes this habitat a really, really important resource for a
a lot of the different animals that live here. So that's pretty fantastic. These ponds are only seasonal, but so it's like a limited time offer. But if you can, come out here and check it out because we got some pretty fantastic things all here living underneath the water right in our own backyards, really. So that's really, really awesome. And you know what? These animals, we talked about a lot of species that are sensitive to pollution and things like that. And for a habitat like this, it's very nice and flat and the water's very shallow. It can be susceptible to things like development. So the things that we can do to protect this type of habitat is maybe not littering is a really, really important one. If you're out on a walk, make sure you're keeping your garbage on your person and then dispose of it properly when you get the chance. We don't want to dump any pollutants or any litter in the water because that can be really harmful to a lot of the critters there. But one of the best things that we can do to protect nature is what you guys are doing right now, sitting there and learning a little bit more about them, because the more people learn about these things, the more there are people that are going to want to protect them. And that's going to be really, really awesome. When we get a whole big group of people all want to protect habitats just like this, I think that would be fantastic. So that does end our video for today. I hope you guys had a lot of fun hanging out with us and learn a couple of new things, or maybe just saw some interesting critters as well. And again, if you want to check out our biodiversity sheets, you can order them online on our website. But until then, we'll see you next week, and I hope you have a fantastic day.